Hello, I'm Michael.
Hello, I'm Ivanka.
This is Michael and Ivanka's Grand Podcast. So, what did you do this week, Ivanka?
I'm a bit fed up of the grey world at the moment, so I'm looking forward to having a bit of time off and spending some time outside. Trump's done something stupid, has he? Brexit. There's been a Brexit breakthrough this morning, apparently. It's all going to be okay. Everybody relax. How's your week?
My week, I've been trying to get better at conversation. I watched the talk that you shared with me, this TED talk on how to become a better conversationalist. And I thought it was interesting, the thing about how we can hear twice as many words. We can understand twice as many words a minute as people speak. So in order to focus on a single person, we're kind of like having to use half of you're kind of going to be a bit bored because your bandwidth is all out of whack with the bandwidth. So I thought that was quite useful to be aware of. And also just the idea of being present. And I'm just trying to be present in conversations in order to both improve this podcast and my life. So, what are we talking about this week?
This week we had decided that we were going to talk about technology.
Cool. It's a big subject, obviously. So where do we start with this? From the dawn of time. So I always feel I have this idea that we are, as a species, inseparable from whatever our current technology is, and that almost if you have not adopted the next sort of generation of technology, you're almost like a different species. So a mobile phone having human being is almost like a different sort of thing to a non-mobile phone having human being. I almost feel it's a sort of qualitative difference in your sort of capabilities. What do you think about that?
So this is a grand approach to the technology podcast, whereas I was thinking about it quite different. I was like, do you like technology? Yes, I love technology. So I was thinking about the top sort of background thinking about the topic in terms of the fact that I like technology, I use technology, I'm not afraid of technology. And I think there is a afraid of technology human and an unafraid of technology human. Which is one decision, and it's a kind of an afraid can have some really negative consequences, not just in not wanting to be included or being excluded socially, being excluded, just missing out on things that do help you, that these changes in technology have done, but in a work context, they actually cause some really poor decisions to be made technologically. Right. And I remember talking to you a few years ago. There was a radio, something on the Today programme probably in the morning about how everyone should learn to code. And I don't necessarily agree or disagree with that at all. But one of the things you and I talked about is that you should understand technology enough not to be duped. Those are your words, quoted back to you. Duped into just, tricked into giving away information about yourself, tricked into buying technology that isn't fit for purpose, tricked into putting up with things that you just shouldn't have to put up with. And going back to the whole buying music and listening, how we're listening to music, Spotify is bloody convenient, especially if you've got a house where you've got a toddler and some grown-ups and some visiting teenagers and you've just got all the music in the world easily accessible. You can change it, you can listen to nursery rhymes 1 second and whatever, but then obviously that can be the I am not paying the price for that convenience, you are, because or people who are making the music. So there are things like that.
So why do you think people are afraid of technology?
Because it's mysterious. They can't see how it works. But then I suppose that was true of cars. So, like in my head, mechanical engineering is more easy to comprehend than electronic engineering because you can see cogs move and gears and stuff like that. And it is quite mysterious, really. It's like the first time I had Wi-Fi in the house. I've told this story publicly before, but at the time I was living with my sister, the 10 years younger sister, who at the time, frankly, was a bit of a Luddite. She's got better now, but she just went, so what? You mean the internet is going to be in the air in the house? That's just wrong.
Well, I mean, there's the Arthur C. Clarke quote that everyone knows that, sufficiently future technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Well, it is very magical, and I think that people are fearful of things. They've always been fearful of things they don't understand, which is hence religion.
Well, yeah, and actually,
or they can't explain.
And yeah, like a formative thing that I think that my first sort of embrace of technology, or one of the early ones, was just realizing how easy it is to make a light bulb light up. You just get a battery and you put the wires across the battery and the light bulb lights up. I thought, that's not mysterious. I mean, it's magic, but it's like, this is something I want to know more about. So I kind of like got into my electronics and at school it was like I wanted to go to an electronics club and learn all that stuff. And I made some weird devices when I was like 10, a little kind of what do I need to bring to school today planner thing. And, and then obviously, parallel to that, all the sort of music tech and all that kind of thing. But yeah, it was, I think, I guess some people either were never shown how straightforward it can be, which is then an educational issue, or, just weren't interested.
I think, but this, I think it translates a little bit as well into your house. For example, I was taught how to change a plug at home as a sort of thing you need to know how to do in life.
You used to have to fit plugs on everything you bought.
Yes. So I was taught to change a plug and change a fuse and...
My sort of closest to getting properly electrocuted when I was a kid was... I plugged in this Scalextric and I was testing something and I just plugged it into the wall with the back off the plug, and then I was like, oh, is the fuse okay? And just sort of stuck my fingers in to pull the fuse out while it was plugged in and got that sort of like jolt, and it was like, that's not what you do. And that could have gone a lot worse.
I did that with the train set because we had a power... Instead of, first of all, we had batteries, and then that was just expensive and not maintainable. So we had, I think my grandpa bought us a power supply, and I just hooked the wires out of the mains around the terminals. I don't think it actually, I had a very relaxed attitude to these things. It wasn't helped when all the way through uni I had a Saturday job fixing tellies and videos. So I was in a proper workshop with a soldering iron, fixing things or doing my best to. I was never super good at it, truth be told. But we would take the plugs off and then use the plug from the soldering iron to push the wires into the socket because we never had enough sockets. So, it's just electricity. I mean, come on, people. I was interviewing some public sector, some civil servants, and one of them she said, and I quote, "It's very easy to feel reassured by IT people."
Okay, really?
And it's that sort of, that's what it was like. We were talking about a procurement that hadn't gone particularly well, and it's this whole, if I don't understand, but the person talking to me about it sounds like they know what they're talking about, then, it's that's the sort of ability to call bullshit on technology in every area of your life, from that doesn't seem like a very sensible login, or I don't know, are you sure my data's safe or whatever,
Yeah.
to, hang on, you're selling me what? That does what? Why would I do this? Like, it's all this. So I think
there's a lot of smoke and mirrors in that world. Yeah, and
there are a lot of smoke and mirrors, yeah. And there's also a lot of, with all the sort of startup world and apps world, there's also a lot of suck it in, just sort of like, yeah, put something out there that I don't know, records some really intimate details about people or stuff, with no real reassurance that the data's safe, that it's in a good place, that it can't, so there's a kind of, I think, but then we I don't know where we're at with our, we still seem to be in the sort of acceleration phase of technology. So we have had a willful lack of desire to understand things. I mean, we've had some good news stories recently, like MPs sharing their logins, for example, is not considered to be best practice. And I think it's actually illegal if you're allowing people's data to be accessed willy-nilly. And then we've had some introductions of some laws around privacy, online privacy, the creation of backdoors in systems, so that you've got all this stuff that politicians are signing up for and getting people excited about, and they don't understand. They don't understand that the risks of sharing their passwords. They don't understand. It's sort of a willful lack of desire to understand the impact of their choices around technology.
Like, it used to be that it was a fiddly and weird to get stuff working, and so even using sort of office apps and stuff, that the design wasn't really there. So people's expectations of how complicated it was going to be to learn how to do something were sort of like, then when they're faced with something new, that they're sort of you still have this legacy of how hard it was to get your head around the previous thing, and you sort of have to bring people in and convince them that, oh, actually that stuff, we've thought about that now, and that was actually under our control, and we've done a much better job, and
come back.
I'm just thinking about, I was kind of thinking about FaceTime. We were trying to get FaceTime to work whilst recording this podcast, but because I've got quite a complicated audio setup, it was because Apple doesn't expose any sort of like controls to tinker with. In FaceTime, it was like it was, things were interfering. It was getting difficult, but in their defense, they make the more esoteric use cases more complicated, but they make the very common ones sort of very frictionless. Whereas it used to be that the sort of common or unusual use cases were sort of on a par, because it was just like a bit more directly exposing the underlying technology. We'd switched over to Skype because it had a bit more control over those settings, but they've just updated it and all of those controls seem to have disappeared. So, but it's sort of a little bit more incompetent about it as well. So, you have this sort of Microsoft trying to follow Apple with design, but simplifying things too much, like beyond the point that they should be simplified, or sort of superficially sort of changing the design of something, but without sort of addressing the actual problems that you're trying to solve with the design. And it's all just a bit gross.
Yeah, but then there's also this thing where obviously different brands need to provide a user experience that's appropriate to their brand and to their product, etc., etc. But there's some things that should be patterns that are shared across different apps, and regardless of manufacturer, some things should work in the same way. It's like they're inventing things just to be different. is a pain in the arse for all
and also
of us.
that doesn't happen just because for brand differentiation. It's also this whole patent situation with technological patents are just what is going on.
That was going to be my next thing, because how different can you make some of these things? You know, they're all basically built around the same model of screens and windows and all layered on top of each. You know,
You just want stuff that takes the best, the best thing that everyone's thought of and just uses that. Which is kind of my approach to design. It's like, this is the best way I've seen this done. I'll do it like this. It's not like, you're very rarely inventing something new. You're just going, oh, well, I saw someone do a better job of that in this app, so why would we do it in the worst way?
Yeah, and also you're just giving people more things to learn. Unless, your new way is so intuitive that they didn't need to find it. They stumbled across it. But I don't know. I think the doing the best of what you've seen is not a bad place to start. Skype has redesigned itself yet again. Moment this morning.
Yeah. The most offensive thing about it being the music that plays when the sort of calling tone is just the worst. They've taken out the sort of the funny sort of like bloop, 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 bloop stuff and just left in the sort of non-melody that was playing. They've just taken all the worst elements of it and made it really generic, put this sort of like house beat under it, and it's just disgusting. And there's no setting to change it. I'm going to have to just go show package contents on this and just delete just replace it, like just put a new CAF file in, just so I don't have to listen to that monstrosity. Been using sort of Spock and Facebook Marketplace recently to try and sort of sell little bits and pieces, and it's just not worth it. It's just not worth the bother of sort of random people having to deal with, like, either sort of like trying to offer you hardly any money, or I swear this guy the other week actually tried to mug me via Facebook. Sort of sent me this message going, if I was trying to get rid of this iPhone 6S, and he's like, if I give you my Galaxy whatever, will you give me your phone and 200 quid? And then sort of like there's a delay. Well, and I sort of saw the notification. It was just like, will you give me your phone and 200 quid? I was like, what? And then I look in, and then I sort of didn't reply. I was like, who are you? And then, a few minutes later, it's like, yes or no, bruv. I'm like, I'm not talking to you. Like, what? Are you serious? And then just another one of like, I send someone the postcode and they just reply, where is that? And I'm like, well, I just can't. What? You're clearly from the species of human. You're clearly from the species of human being that doesn't use Google Maps. And I'm from the species that does, and we just can't win. We can't communicate.
we can't meet up in real life.
It's just not going to happen.
We have no way to communicate.
People asking for directions. Yeah, it's like, have you heard of Citymapper? Like, what? Like, what are you talking about?
See, I don't sell. I do buy secondhand things. I think that's obvious for a closet environmentalist. Am I a closet environmentalist? No, I'm an environmentalist. I try and buy lots of things
environmentalist.
I think I'm pretty out. Yeah, so I try and buy lots of things secondhand. I tend to give more things away than I do sell them, because I'm not making any use of this at the moment. So I do the charity shop clothes run, but then if it's something nice I'm getting rid of, I'll go in and go, look, this dress is really nice. Please don't just flog it for £5, just in case you weren't paying attention. So I can be a bit like that. And the thing though I have most trouble with is getting rid of electronics.
Yeah,
it really is a pain, because once it stopped working, you want. It's a pain to get rid of. I do have drawers of bits and pieces of things that maybe have a little hard drive on them, maybe have some sort of capacity to store something, but they've completely lived out their usefulness. And
there's nothing more worthless than an iPad that you don't keep charged. Like, once you stop keeping something charged, it's just
pointless. Yes. I don't know if anyone's ever worked out what purpose iPads serve. And I say this as the owner of 2 of them.
Yeah, I think I'm on my 4th. You sort of go through phases with it, don't you? But and like, ironically, my iPads I've got the smaller one now because it's a bit easier to use. But I think just a lot of the promise of the iPad is now the phablet, isn't it? People just kind of got a bigger phone. The
phablet. God, yes, the phablet. No, it's like we've invented this thing. Now everybody walk around their house trying to work out what it's. Once you've got past the sort of like, oh look, you can swish it and wave at it and move things around on the screen. Right now, what do we use it for? Shopping, recipes in the kitchen,
selfies.
I
was in New York, a few years back when we were at Canonical. I kind of went on that holiday to New York on my own. So I was in New York for a few days, and it was just before front-facing cameras started going into phones. And I was thinking, they should put a front-facing camera in this thing so that I can sort of take a picture and not have to sort of awkwardly turn it around. And to me, it was just like a utilitarian, just obvious feature that you'd add, and and then like a few months, a year or two later, this word selfie is everywhere, and it's gross, and it's I like the technology, but I don't like the way it's kind of the cultural impact of it sometimes. It's like the way people sort of, latch on to the most, I don't know, stupid thing about it.
It
becomes a phenomenon in its own right. And you're like, oh, guys, I mean...
Maybe next week we should do violence.
Violence.
Because politics, death, technology, violence.
Oh, wow. And like technology's role in violence has been pretty. So I mean, obviously this is the opposite of talking about social media, but yeah, technology's. We characterize the sort of catastrophes of the 20th century and 21st century, even like in terms of individuals, but I really see it as early adopters of whatever the big technology was at that time, being kind of one of the driving factors in sort of in these kind of terrible things that happened. Like the ability to have mass media suddenly opened up the doors to this thing, and a new technology comes in and it's used, and like just the invention of tanks and mechanical killing machines that just never existed, and people trying to like Dan Carlin's podcast is worth a listen for this. This is where I really got heard about this, but this using pre-industrial sort of military strategies against these just like meat grinders that were now sort of like, it was just a different class of thing, and people sort of not quite like, when a new technology comes in, people don't realize how powerful it is, or they do, or like bad people will adopt it, and the worst side of an unscrupulous person can be amplified beyond all reason. And I think the latest thing we saw of this was the sort of Donald Trump and even Brexit related sort of Facebook ad targeting stuff that was going on with Cambridge Analytica. There was some stuff going on there, some unscrupulous exploitation of the technology towards who knows what ends. Well, towards and we end up in this situation. And I have this. My worry is that this kind of the sort of Second World War happened, but then we were able to start putting things in place to try and prevent that happening again. There was enough time to sort of do that, and things got better. But now, when the next sort of exploitative technology comes through, there's less time for these sort of slow-moving political systems to catch up, and the best they can do is, you've got to put a cookie warning on your website. Like, that's their attempt to kind of stem the flow of like the exploitative technology and people misusing it. And I just feel like our ability to adapt on a sort of government, and I don't know what you call it, but like our ability for our systems that protect people to adapt to the technology that is being developed and used to exploit people by nefarious agents is now been overtaken. The government is never going to be able to keep up with the stuff that's happening. So, and this goes back to, modern terrorism wouldn't be feasible without the technology that goes along with that helps people organize in secret across wider areas. And a lot of this, we need a new way of protecting people. And unfortunately now the arbiters of that are your kind of Apples and Facebooks and Googles. You could sort of take your hat off to Apple for sort of widely publicising the absurd FBI sort of data privacy sort of requests, and like trying to explain like you do not understand what you're asking for, and like making that a very public thing.
I have one positive thing to say to lift us up again before we go back into this. But on the subject of Cambridge Analytica, and I was talking to somebody who I talked to about politics a lot, and one of the things she pointed out was, look at all that effort they had to put in, and the margin by which they tipped the balance was tiny.
Mm. Well, I mean, I don't think it should have been close. I think it should have been, like, for instance, the Brexit vote. I thought it was going to be, 8% of people were, leave. And anything above that is still kind of an astonishing disaster to me. Like, I don't care if it was like 1% in the middle. It's like, it shouldn't have been anything like that. Like,
yeah, I mean, we both live in areas with a massive Remain vote,
and maybe
so.
But maybe that's like also like with the technology, maybe they had such accurate measurements that they knew that they sort of optimized how much money they spent, so that they just tipped it as far as they had to and not too much further.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's a negative. So I was trying to be positive the argument being that the positive argument being, look how much effort and how much they had to use technology just to make a small difference, and we put no effort in because we didn't realise what we were fighting against. And I think really it shouldn't take a lot of effort to flip it the other way, though the results of the general election would imply that we're not being devious enough. The side of righteousness is not being, because everyone thinks they're right. It's difficult. But anyway.
This is another Adam Curtis thing that he was talking about to Adam Buxton the other week about how that the left doesn't seem to be very good at kind of doing this stuff that the right is getting better at doing. Anyway, politics.
Yeah.
Let's
so that's politics. But your point you're making is a really important point, is that the people that are making policy and campaigning to be elected, and they just want to tell stories that are going to get people to vote for them, they don't understand the technology, they don't understand what they're asking for, they don't understand the risks, and they seem to be completely unwilling to engage with the people who do.
And also that I think they should be. You'd hope they were good enough judges of character that they could find people that weren't too unscrupulous to kind of help them and to listen to. But yeah, they're also, if they don't learn it themselves, like they've got to find someone like you or me to actually kind of give them the.
But if you think about this in the context of the NHS, the NHS has or had, I hope it still has, NICE, that the what they call the National Institute for Clinical Excellence, and NICE comes up with a recommendation on medication, vaccination, on all these things based on research, scientific papers, and obviously they're balancing the benefits of the public purse and all that sort of stuff. But it's whilst money does come into their decision making, clinical decision making is the government defers to NICE for a recommendation on a nationwide vaccination program, for example. Yeah, we have no equivalent in technology. Do we? I don't know. We have the what they called GCHQ type people, the government security people, but they're not making out, as far as I know. These people aren't making out and out technology recommendations for the country. I don't know where the decisions come from, because, for example, the technology schools choose to buy or not buy. They're not necessarily dictated to them. They've got their own budgets. They make their decisions, or they don't have budgets, which is more the case these days. I don't know who's explaining what why who is helping form these policies for which you need to be informed.
And the trouble is, it's such a moving target, so it needs to be
constantly.
It needs to be able to move with the pace of technology.
One of my a friend of my father, when I was about 14, 15, talking about studying electronics, he was like, "Oh, you can't study electronics if you're a woman. You need to continue to study for the rest of your life, and you're just not going to have time to do that with children." Okay. But yeah, you do need to constantly stay on top of it. With technology, you can't take. You can take a very limited sabbatical from learning.
And also, but the trouble is, like how many? We even see it in companies. Like as soon as someone becomes that like managery person and stops being hands-on with the technology, they usually they sort of lose credibility on the technology pretty quickly. But keeping up with the technology is a full-time job. So then being able to advise people, when do you how do you connect that person with the policymakers in a meaningful way, in a sustainable way?
But in a work business context, I mean, I've worked with you, and if there's something I don't know about, I'm going to ask you. You surround yourself with people as you sort of end up in a position where you can't possibly be informed enough. And I think that there are not many projects where one person can hold all the information from a technology. It's just doesn't exist anymore. You need somebody who knows about platform security, coding language, interaction design, and one or two of us can cover off a couple of subjects, but nobody can cover off all of them. And so it's just a question of who are the people advising, and are they being heard, and how do we get them to be heard? Because if somebody's if you're running your own company, you want to make shit up, go for your life. But if you're running the country, I'm afraid that's not good enough. It's not cool.
Have you heard about Estonia? They've got health, voting, taxes, transport, emergency services, all managed through this single sort of central identity system, and with sort of digitally secure communication between everything. So they're just talking about how many brilliant things they can do by just having this really nice infrastructure. And they seem to be doing this really well.
They are. They have an advantage that they had no legacy infrastructure. So the Soviet Union, disappeared. They became a country. They got nothing. It's like that project. I did a project years ago in Turkey for one of the banks, and we got there. They were way ahead of us in terms of as consumers, what you could do in a bank. You could text your mate money. This is 10 years ago. you could text somebody and they could go to a cash point, put in that code. You could lend them money that way. It was just phenomenal compared to what we had still, what we still have, let alone. And it's like, we do have this disadvantage, really. It's like when people talk about modernising London as a city. London is such an old city that, you can't, there's only so much you can do.
There's too much stuff that you can't lose, that you can't just let disappear away. And that's different. It's different in China, isn't it? Where, I was in Hong Kong a couple of years ago, and one thing I found really interesting was when you don't have to sort of deal with any kind of political dissent or like people kind of grumbling, you can just sort of make stuff work. And they're much more, seem to be a lot less fixated on legacy, don't they? In they'll sort of level areas and replace them with cities without worrying, which you just couldn't do in the UK.
I went backpacking in China in 1996, and put my friend from uni and I went travelling together. We went to this museum in China. Well, we didn't go to China. We went on the Trans-Siberian Railway, and you had to go somewhere. So we went to China. It was more the Trans-Siberian that we did. But we ended up doing loads of distance in China. We're in a museum, chess museum, which was really quite interesting. And this guide was telling us about this bed, and he's like, "This bed is a 5th century bed," and he's tugging at the curtains on it. That's like, and at the beginning of that trip, we'd been in the Hermitage in St. Petersburg. And I'd accidentally leant against a chair that looked just like an ordinary kitchen table. And this sort of got massively told off by this Russian lady, one of the guards, because it was Tsar so-and-so's kitchen table or something. And I was like, and then here's this guy tugging at this 2,000-year-old bit of curtain. I don't know, I can't remember how old it was, but I was like, what? So, there's kind of like absence of respect
absence of reverence for the kind of physical thing sometimes, but sort of stuff gets replaced with rather than kind of, we keep all of our kind of battle scars on our buildings and, that's all very important to us here. But I guess it is cultural. It's like, they're just objects. Yeah, true. It's the problem.
But a lot of projects, like especially, public sector projects I get dragged into, this sort of legacy stuff is the bane of everyone's lives, because you've got to sort of, you're always building on something that isn't. It's like, I think there's an old one of those Irish jokes where I'm not going to attempt the accent or something, but the guy goes, "Excuse me, how do I get to so and so?" And the guy looks at him and goes, "I wouldn't have started here." And it's that kind of, they saw very well this thing we're trying to build, but we've got to build it on what?
This kind of ironic thing that like a lot of early adopters of technology are now sort of stuck with really horrible old technology that they have to sort of I don't know, how hard would it be to just write a script and migrate?
Well, I think everyone's terrified of migrating. It's just like it's just anyway, we could rabbit on like this for hours, but
migration isn't that hard. Come on, guys.
Come on, people. It's like the bank. So Nick's got a business bank account and a personal bank account with the same bank. And a business bank account, you can only download the last 3 months of credit card statements. But the personal one, you can download the last 5 years. Like, it's much more a use case that when you're doing business bookkeeping, that you need to download years worth of bloody.
Every year I have this.
I had to type them in. I had to literally order paper copies of some of them and then type them in, because I was like, come on, it's 2017. Come on, people, get it together. This is the thing my sister says about me, like, nothing ever quite works properly because I'm always fiddling. One of her stories from when we were living together is like, we had 3 PCs in the house and not a single working CD drive because you had to carry it. It's like, look, don't be like that.
Well, this is why, I try and keep my technology that I'm tinkering with as a different sort of thing to my appliances that I rely on, and I try and keep those appliances. I try and treat my phone as like a fridge or a TV. Like, it's not something that I want to get into the guts of and start like messing up.
I've got a pretty annoying problem with my current setup at home for watching TV, because I have a projector that has a wireless box so I can have the wireless box thing plugged into my audiovisual amplifier, and then I have my Apple TV and my Virgin Media thing and everything going into the amp. And so my amp I use to switch between my devices, and then that should go to the transmitter, transmit to the projector, boom, everyone's watching telly. I've recently upgraded my Virgin Media thing, and now every so often the projector feed just sort of goes into stop-start mode, and it's doing my head in, and I really don't know what to blame it on.
I had that with the worst one was I had a Airport Express, which I was just using to play music from my phone into the stereo, and there is nothing worse than that sort of digital stop-start thing happening when you just want to listen to the music. And it wasn't happening with video or my Apple TV or anything. That was fine, but for some reason, just playing some music, it was just like cutting out all the time, and it's like I just got to give up on this.
I don't know. I'm at a loss really as to what else to try, because so it's not the port. I've eliminated ports. I've done new HDMI cables. Blah blah blah. No, just don't watch telly.
That's why it is such a revelation when something just sort of you can just seem to be able to plug something in and it
works.
It's not your problem to make it work. I think that's the difference. Something that governmental technology procurement gets wrong, but Apple generally has been doing pretty well at, is that like it's not your problem if it doesn't work. If I take my Mac's acting weird, it's Apple's problem. If my PC's acting weird, what did I do to it?
Yeah.
And that's sometimes you want it to be someone else's problem to make something that works properly. Do you ever sort of like turn off your phone, or
we have
do you have a
phone
kind of
exclusion zone in the house?
Zone?
Oh, they're not supposed to be brought into the sofa area.
Oh, really? Wow. But how do you look up things while you're watching a TV
Well, then
show?
you have to go, is it all right if I go and get my phone? Whose phone's closest? What does this score on IMDb?
So it's a generalised, like full-time sort of like no-tech zone.
Well, it's not generally. Well, yeah, because also I don't really want the toddler person to see me constantly attached to a device.
Yeah.
So, putting it away, putting it to charge. We're all in the house. It does help that, this is one use of the Apple Watch, is the whole, if somebody is phoning you, I do get a text message, or my mum phones, I know she's phoning and I can go and get my phone without having to sit there refreshing Facebook endlessly and seeing if anything's happened.
So should we go on reflection?
On reflection. On reflection.
I'm going to do some Alan Partridge style jingles.
Okay.
On reflection. That can be the on reflection section.
Okay. The on reflection section.
Yeah, so last week, I feel like I interrupted you when you were talking about the principles, adhering to principles, if not the actual thing that you've made so far. It's hard to let go of things, but then there's another level on top of the specific thing you've made, which is the sort of principles behind it, and sort of sticking to the principles, if not the particular implementation. I thought, anyway, I can just say I thought that was an interesting point that I didn't immediately pick up on, that I thought bore kind of, calling out again.
I think last time I wasn't quite ready to start. I wasn't fully present, so I wasn't really ready, and so I wasn't, and I was bracing myself for the topic. That's what I did think about. So I wasn't sure, in retrospect, I was happy we did each of us sort of broadcast our stories, and then we chatted about other things rather than chatting about their stories. But then I wondered if I could have been listening better, which was...
Well, yeah, I realised I should have asked some questions. I think we both had this... Yeah. We're both trying to kind of like get our heads around listening to each other.
So if nothing else, we're just going to end up being better friends and better at talking to each other, so that's good. So I didn't have anything quite as pinpointy as the week before.
I've been taking notes, so I've got a couple more as well. Um, one was just when we were talking about the music thing and music and its relationship to design, and I was thinking how like composition is one thing, but actually like music performance, I find is much more of a design space. You've already made the thing, and you've got to kind of come up with a way to achieve that, and that's definitely a lot more of a design problem. Something I'm focusing on at the moment. And the other one was I just wanted to share my outlook on, when someone does die. The secular belief is, okay, that's it. They're just gone, and that's it. And that's fine. That's true in a sort of like physical body way. But if we appreciate the fact that we are composed of, and this is taken from a good book by Douglas Hofstadter, who wrote the very famous among geeks Gödel Escher Bach, but also he wrote one called Le Tombeau de Marot, which is a pun, and it's about language. But he talks about, and he also talks about the death of his wife, and how he kind of sees that. But the way he put it was that by sharing mutual experiences with someone else, there is a very real sense in which the same consciousness exists in two bodies, the same aspects of two, like that's now, it's the same thing in two different locations. So if one of those locations dies, it's like there's redundancy.
Yeah, I'm nodding instead of...
But also in terms of, just ideas being expressed and just sayings and like there's memories as well as a part of it, but more kind of our behaviors that we kind of inherit, or those things that we experience with someone else. So even though sort of like one, and the way he described that was like our souls are actually crossing, like they're not sort of separate individual souls. They're sort of like we cross over with other people, so that even if one person's body dies, there is still a lot of that person sort of existing in the people close to them. And that's how I kind of think about that, the sad part of death and the loss of kind of the idea of eternal life and like afterlife and things like that, is just the fact that death isn't quite as abrupt as secular convention would have us think about it.
I was nodding while you were talking, but I think yes, I agree with you, and I think that's how I see it. And I think that the people that and I think that's not just true of people who have physically died, but people we've known and they move on. It's hard. It's harder to lose people these days, what with Facebook and all. But and the moments that you shared together do stay alive, and they can make you laugh just as much as if they were there sometimes, because you can imagine telling them a thing, or you have those shared experiences and those shared responses. And I think I mentioned last week as well how having a child's made me more aware of my own mortality. And I had this weird thing about telling my child I'm going to love her forever, and I was thinking, what am I saying? That's so weird. Or what do I mean? What's forever? And I'm like, and I was really quite uncomfortable with that. I didn't know what I thought. It's just a peculiar set of feelings that I'd not thought about before. And then slowly I've become very comfortable with the idea that of course I'm going to love her forever, because I'm going to be showing her love, and that's going to stay with her. So it's like so it's okay to say those things, and it's okay because it is a forever connection, regardless of physical. It's in the same way that I feel forever connected to my father, or that it's just. So I completely agree with you that it's the idea.
It's not as clear cut.
No, it's not. They've gone to heaven or not, or whatever. They're in a different plane or in a different place, and maybe it is a different plane. I don't know, but it's like that kind of, if they're existing, if the souls have crossed over, which is a nice way of putting it, or there's like built-in redundancy. It's a nice way of knowing that they are. You can still, chat to your dad and go, what would you do about it?
In a very real sense. And just the idea that we are sort of insulated individuals is kind of wrong. We're kind of hodgepodge of lots of different sort of abstract machines. You could call, some philosophers call them Deleuze and Guattari, who I don't like, but I like the abstract machines idea, which we just have all of these different machines, and that's why it's so easy to have kind of cognitive dissonance and sort of believe one thing and believe the opposite, because these things sort of like float around and they're different, and they're parts of different people, and we're not just like there's not just a clear boundary between two individual humans. It's more fluid than that. All right, thanks everyone for listening this far. Shall we tell people where they can find us online and stuff now?
You can find me at Ivanka on Twitter and ivanka.blog.
You can find me at Michael Forrest on Twitter and michaelforrestmusic.com.
You can find us both at grandpodcast.com and email us at hello@grandpodcast.com.
There's a Patreon thing, but we've still got to figure that out. At grandpodcast.com/pledge. Or sledge.
Sledge.
Bye.
Bye.